All right. Okay, so I've got some cut out samples. Those you got the same ones. These are the sort of thing that um, I imagine it's not the easiest in the world to try to get people to pay you for. Like music became something that uh, it's kind of hard to get people to pay you for anymore. But there's sites and there's things on online where you can buy this many poses, and you can buy if you don't have an actual model, you can get something like that. So many of these are actually like just the kind of things that you can find in an image search, and many of them are for the very purpose of figure drawing. Uh, and you can grab like one of these off you'll see they're hoping that you'll buy a package of, or you'll have one of these video things where you can, the poses switch and you'll watch it and you'll draw along and so forth. It's all a little weird, actually. Just like it will be Wednesday, I think a little bit weird. But I don't know how much well, the music analogy is apt, I think, because past a certain point, it probably became pretty hard to get folks to pay for this kind of stuff, or much of anything for that matter. If it can be sort of acquired, without paying. Now, I certainly haven't acquired any of these like changing poses or videos or anything like that. Just some of the pictures that are accompany stuff to sell to you. But usually, before a live model appears, I will do a little bit of work from just pictures, and I used all of it up in another class very recently. But I have a book, or I had a book, antiquated book from like the 70s, an artist's model reference book, full of poses. And I'd bring something like that to the class. Kids will tear it up, tear pictures out of it and stuff like that, do drawings from it. Nothing this dynamic, mind you. This is probably for people who are doing game design or some kind of look, they're at war, they're fighting, really dynamic poses. So there'll be a lot of quick poses, obviously something like that. I don't see holding that pose very long, do you? Of course, I can't hold a pose. If you try to, you'll gain a whole new respect for those who do this kind of work, because just to sit still in a chair and not move at all for 20 minutes is really rough. You see those who, are really contorting themselves and putting them into crazy positions for, a solid minute for the purpose of you drawing them. You get some admiration and some respect. A couple of things that, well, let's see. Figure drawing. Everybody following along? Yeah. Take some notes, draw along. Figure drawing is, a lot of people really like it. They really enjoy it. I taught a lot of classes, excuse me, dropped something on the floor. I've taught a lot of classes using models in the figure over the years, and folks like to do it, okay? And that may be that it's because it's people, right? Like, all right, I mean, certainly if I took a survey and I wanted to know what was more exciting to people, still lives or people, they'd probably elect for the figure class. Although if I've converted anybody, forms are forms, right? We separate ourselves from our meetings, but the human form is, so engaging for us. And most people, I think, sort of regard drawing people as both the top, goal-wise, but then also the most difficult. Or sort of remember all that stuff I said about how last time, doing the portrait, about how your criticism of yourself would go through the ceiling and you'd be much more demanding because you would want it to look, did everybody experience that? Like drawing faces versus drawing things, how it bugs you if it's not right, and all of these things. So this is there too. We're looking at the bodies, not just the faces, but we get kind of like, okay, cool, we're gonna do some people now. But for just drawing in general, for what we call your chops, like just it's probably the single, working from a life model will probably, keep you drawing well better than anything else. It's people who don't even do that in their studio practice will sometimes still do life drawing just because it's like a vitamin B shot. You know what I mean? It's like just really good for your drawing, even if you don't intend to make figurative work. Now, if you heard me, and I know you have, use this term before, talking about it, saying that it's coming, talking about other types of drawing that we've done, sort of working together with this. Let me just talk about it for a while. Okay, gesture. Drove by a car today, the guy gave me a gesture. That's not really, that's not really what I'm talking about. But it's a very similar sort of term, in that it means like the act, right? So the term can be like, well, that was something very pleasant that you did, or it can mean specifically like what I'm doing with my hands, but basically this will be the thing that you'll have a hard time with it probably, because it's sort of unlike line weight variation where I just show you and I tell you and you start doing it. This must be practiced. And this never gives you a sort of, I mean, you might, but you're probably not going to do gesture drawings and then like, well, this is going to take this home and frame it. This is very much a physical practice-based thing. So we talk about it a lot because it often takes a while for folks to get the concept, before they do it well. You can do this with anything. You've got something in your hand. Some things may be better than others. We've got, this is a stick of vine. You got something in your hand, you can do gesture. Now everything has a gesture. Here's a gestural duck, right? A duck drawn gesturally. A teapot, may have done this before, I don't know, but a teapot can be, everything has a gesture. But with things that don't move and are inanimate, it can be sort of harder. I mean, like, look at this. That's in action. That's in motion, all right? And that's the key with gesture. Here's the big thing to remember with gesture. Somebody complete that for me. Well, wait a minute. If I don't draw what it looks like, what the heck am I doing? Isn't that what you do when you draw? You draw what things look like. But this old phrase about gesture, don't draw what it looks like, draw
What it
somebody.
moves like?
Pretty close. Pretty close. Yeah, draw what it's doing. Now, of course, it here, I mean, it's usually going to be people, right? So it's they or, it. So nobody's meaning to insult models there, but that's the phrase, is we tend, and this is where the big concept is, we tend to do that, okay? Hard to do this. But if we seek to do that, draw what it's doing, stands to reason that it would be good to have some poses that were dynamic and were active and were busy and all of that. Okay. But easier said than done. Okay. Every pose that a model person takes has one thing you can kind of start with. There's one kind of, and then there's other things that may be going on too, but there's one big thing. For example, here, everybody watch close. Here, the first thing I would respond to here would be this. You see where I got that? That's sort of like, well, big deal, right? But you'd be amazed how easy it is to start drawing arms and legs and sticks and whatever else, hair. Gesture is all about kind of getting this sense of action, life, activity, and all that. Like you get the gesture, right? If you don't have it, you can't put it back in after the fact. You can't do a real picky drawing of something and then add the action or the sense of movement or whatever you want to call it, at the end. So gesture is kind of a thing. I mean, it's just good for your figure drawing, period. But it's also like a way to kind of get not stiff, not empty, not dead. Like if your figures seem like they're alive and that sense of what's happening is happening, right? That happens through gesture. But a lot of other things do too. So pure gesture drawings, and this will probably be confusing, are these scribbly things, right? Where, have you seen them? You ever seen just pure gesture drawings? Anybody? It's okay if you haven't. I already feel a little restricted and want to go to another page. Plan on that when we have models. Plan on like doing a lot of stuff quick and having to just do this or use the backs of pages or that kind of thing, going through using a lot of paper. But if you say, hey, Mullins, give me a gesture drawing of this, I'm probably going to do something along the lines of this. And so is this because, I want to scribble? Well, I do want to scribble, but there's a reason for that. Is that the only way to do this? No. Are pure gesture drawings, the end all be all? Well, no. But most classes over the years, we would warm up with gestures, meaning a model at the beginning of the class would give us a lot of half-minute, 30 seconds poses, and we do these scribble drawings. Now, why might we do those? Well, I don't know if I ever saw anybody sort of like leap through the air like that, although When it's only 30 seconds, models can give you some pretty dynamic, poses. And those are great for gesture. Is it because I'm going to take my page of scribble drawings at the end of the day and I'm going to hand them in, and those are going to be, I'm going to take them home and frame them? Or in this case, there's a bend. Everybody see that? So here, like the sound effects, they're very appropriate actually, though. There's no better way to say it than, right? Every pose, before we get into what particular limbs are doing or whatever, there's something, some big overall something that you want to have in your drawing, and that's the gesture. So instead of drawing all of the arms, legs, torso, I'm drawing the thrust. I'm drawing the bend. I'm drawing the twist. I'm drawing the, you know what I mean, whatever, fill it in. But there's something like that. And then after starting with that, and then maybe, doing the thing that you do when you do a gesture drawing, which is keeping your pencil or whatever it is that's in your hand going and not lifting it, and being fast and being very loose and all that, you'll get buildup of things that will start to suggest additional information like limbs and stuff. But there's always this action. You don't contrive a back. You don't try to do a leg. You don't think, well, there is the torso, so I'm drawing a torso. You do what it's doing. Now, this will be really hard. You know what the hardest poses to do for this kind of stuff are not ones like this. Because when the body twists and turns like that, you'll pick up on it. The hardest to do will just be your, standing there pose. Just a standing pose, or, something like this. There's still a gesture here. It might be subtle. It might just be a little tilt. It might be a little, but you'll have trouble doing what I ask you to do on poses that are more like that, because they're not unlike things I said about the face. The closer it is to an idea we have about symmetrical body parts, or the less it is kind of like announcing its activity, the harder it will be to just draw, just a little shift in weight in a standing pose will be harder for you than, if somebody's really bending at the waist, or they're really twisting or turning or something like that. Can anybody tell me in this image, incidentally, for a sticker, what we call it in fancy art historical terms when we figured out, or it was figured out, that we don't just stand perfectly, like the Egyptian kind of thing where the legs are sort of, there's that rigidity and but there's that actual shift where one knee bends a little bit and the weight goes on one leg but not the other. Anybody know that one? Contrapposto. Another Renaissance type term. So when you see those Kouros figures and the legs are the same, one of them is stepping forward, but they're the same, but they look kind of awkward. They hadn't worked out the contrapposto yet, but this is a contrapposto, that thing we do where we put our weight, just a little shift of the hip, and we put our weight all on one leg and the other not on both. But a pose like that will actually be harder for you than something like that. So yeah, gesture. Model hits a pose like this, and I immediately, and I want that, and I can't get it enough, and that's all I'm thinking about, and I'm scribbling, and but yeah, now this one I'd say that's a thrust. This has might call that thrust, but I want that, right? And I do one of these scribble drawings to try to get that. Warming up with gesture can be as much about this as anything else, loosening up. Now, everybody knows that if you care, you're tight. Everybody knows that if you're trying to do well, you're all sort of hunched over and you're like, gotta get a good grade on this exam. But it's not true. As counterintuitive as it may seem, the way to do this right is to be really relaxed. So everybody go like this. Before we gesture draw, put a little WD-40 right here in this, Now, sometimes I'll be telling you to draw like this, and I'll tell you to lock that hinge. But when you do gesture, I'd like for this to just swivel freely. And I'd like you to, I'd like you to feel it in your elbow and even your shoulder. Might start to sound a little hokey, but basically what we're trying to do is feel what the model is doing and let that come through our arm and fling out our fingertips in the marks that we're making, right? So that we can get the pose, okay? Now, these pure gestures, which are just scribble, can give way to modified, where you're working gesturally and you're adding a little bit more information, but everything you do is informed by your sense of the gesture, so you get a little bit more telling. I always say that when we're doing pure gesture, you shouldn't try to describe or contrive the two sides of a body or a body part. This is hard to do, especially around the torso. Because that's basically, when we're thinking about what something looks like, that's what we'll do. We won't just make marks that are bending or reaching or whatever the same way as, we won't do that. We'll say, here is this side of this and here's that side of this. So here's how I do this wrong. Okay. Now there's times when we draw in which you might do something like this, but you're not doing gesture right if you're doing this. If we're doing our gesture drawings and you're going slow, well, there's one thing you're doing wrong, is you're going slow. And if you're putting down the two sides of body parts, then you're drawing body parts. You're not drawing the gesture. Make sense? Right? So if I'm going, okay, this is a scribble drawings, this is a time that you kind of, but I'm hunched over and I'm kind of going like this, I'm making choppy, slashy kind of marks rather than, I'm not in the gesture zone here, right? There's this kind of natural S-curve that we do. I found when we're real gestural, everybody go like this. Make sure that wrist hinge is loose. And if I'm good and loose, I'll go like that. And I'll get variation in line weights within my marks because I'm so loose, right? We want to be loose. We want to be curvy. Sometimes I'll actually tell people to do it. They'll get in the habit of actually kind of doing this. Just making some of those S-curves on the side of a page before they start their gesture drawings because they want to be, they don't want to be going, So if I'm all uptight and I'm still just seeing the two sides of things, I'm not going to get a real dynamic sense of action, by if I'm drawing like that. If I feel restricted and I need more room and my marks are really curvy, then I'm doing better. I'm being more gestural. Okay. So you can try some of these. You'll see that it feels very different when a real person hits a pose than to do it from an image. You'll see that. If you've got something like this, and you're sort of like, oh, there's a kind of, I can see how this dovetails with cross contour molds, and boy, am I uptight. I'm tight right now. I'm stiff. I'm jerking around. I need to loosen up. I'm curvier. There is, I think, a lot to be said for sort of being kind of just, am I able to forget about everything else and just give this pose my everything? Can I see the when a model hits a pose? Can I see that as an opportunity to connect with that pose and get it, more than I usually do or I ever have before? Can I be more gestural? Can I be looser? Can I be curvy? It doesn't just happen like pow. It's more like something you do and you do it some more, and you do it some more. I had a page of gestures that I did in a class, and I thought they were quite good. And a year or so later, you pull them out, and it's like, no, they're not as good as it should evolve like that. It should change. Who has questions about gesture? What it is, what it's about? Because sometimes approaching the figure, I'll get stuff like, hey, Mullins, do you start with the head? And I'll say, well, I'll start with the gesture. I'll do a loose sketch and I keep it all going together. And you know what I mean? It's very antithetical to ideas we have about, in our head about what's going on and what we need to do. And doing gesture drawings doesn't give me, they're not completed sort of, the gesture warm-ups, 1 minute poses, 30-second poses, they say so much, but a successful one is going to look, they do look beautiful, I think, if they're done right. But they basically talk about action, they don't include everything. And sometimes that's a little hard for folks to sort of like get the concept of. But if you've got the concept, you'll be okay. If you try a little bit each time, the right things, if you remember what's important about it each time that you do gesture drawings, that will pay off. But there's also something about gesture that's very much like, how you can go to the gym and you can go through the motions and not really do it, or not really like get, you know what I mean? Like you can go to the gym, you can go through the motions, but you can sort of like not extract the full benefit, let's say. Gesture can be like that, where at the beginning of classes, we could sort of, okay, we're doing these scribble drawings, and you can kind of, and you can go through the motions. But if you're trying at each one of these, every time you're trying to connect to the model more, every time you're trying to be looser, every time so there will be a benefit, there will be a change, there will be a payoff. It's very much like that. And in classes, I would see that. I would see folks who were really doing it. You could see on their faces, you could see during the gesture warm-ups that they were all about it. And there would be a difference in their gestures at the end of the semester versus earlier on. And then those that kind of went through the motions, their gestures would generally look the same as they did in the beginning. So keep that in mind. So if a gesture, so here, if you have of course, in So real studios, I like to be up in front of like an actual person waving my hand. You know what I mean? 6 feet, kind of like that in front of the model, uh, because they're, you know, it's physical. We're making drawings on paper, but we're feeling this stuff, you know. But say you're making good gestural drawings, okay, and then what, right? Because I think gesture is a great way to start a drawing. It doesn't mean that you have to like, you know, scribble eternally, although we've made tons of great work by doing these kind of light scribbly. You'll see in your Conte crayon, you in your package, you've got some of these, you know, and a real common strategy with figure drawing is, you know, kind of this kind of stuff where you have a pose and you do some stuff with this, and then you know, drag out one of the darker things and go over top of it with the additional information. Okay, that's a, you know, that's kind of a tradition. There's a reason. There's a reason that there's like the sienna, and there's you know, that those are in your little box of Conte crayons, because that's like an old standard, you know, to work with the sanguine, you know, which is the reddish one, and then to go over it with something darker. Okay, but to go from gesture drawing into full-on, more finished drawings and to keep gesture is a challenge. I'll usually have big chunks of time in which we work on that, where we try to be like, okay, we did our scribble drawings, now that's over with, to hell with that, and then we just sort of tighten back up, and so there's always some attention given to trying to keep the impact of gesture and to retain the gestural mark, as I call it. So if I'm drawing a 2-minute pose, right? Say somebody could actually hold something like this for 2 minutes, but you know, I don't just, you know, say to heck with it. I try to still let, you know, gesture inform what I'm doing, right? So degrees of this stuff. And you can find, I'll try to show you some examples. You can find stray lines, and you can find evidence of all this in old master drawings, because this is how they did it. You know, they worked stuff out this way, and then they built it up and put on all this other, you know, all the way down to like, you know, muscles and things like that. Take one of these, let's see, take one of these images you got, something like this, one of these types of things, and a sheet of your newsprint, because what will happen next time is I'll just be firing. I'll sound like a coach. I'll be like, all right, 2-minute poses, let's go, bam, you know, and I'll be shouting out these kinds of things. And all right, you know, you'll be turning the page. Things will be happening pretty fast. But something like this that has a lot of light and shadow, let's shift gears now. Okay, so there's gesture. Gesture can call gesture back at the drop of a hat. But everybody now, do this with me. Follow along with me. Get an image like this and try this, okay? Get a stick of charcoal or Conte. And I want you to I want you to try, give you some flashbacks to early days in our class, which wasn't that long ago, but may now seem like a long time, where we worked on structural lines. Okay? Try with the figure, which is an image that we are sort of imagining is a posed real figure. Try some structural line work, meaning you have you see I'm filling up the page now. You know, you're making some of these rough cuts, as I call them, that sort of combine. I like this one because she literally falls into the shadows, this model, and that's good. But try some of these things. We did this on stuff. We did this, we were working on still lives and things, and you saw demos from me. But try to get, knowing that you don't have to do it perfectly right away, like we were doing some of our big cutouts sculpturally. So we'll begin to get some information about plane. Try to get everything going together and compare it and draw through. Did I get something too big? What is the relationship between something I see here and this thing over there? It's okay for me to put lines lightly all the way through the figure. I don't have to be, you know, something can go in heavier later. I'm trying to work this out, right? Looking and looking and getting more familiar and looking some more. And what are the relationships between these things? And don't worry so much about some idea you have about arms or thighs or legs or abdomens or anything like that. Rather, shape and form comparisons, draw through. If you make a bum note, as it were, if you put some lines down and it's like, well, it's not that, it's this, we'll just make it, you know, make that updated observation a little heavier, right? And then when you feel like things are coming together all right, you don't need any crazy changes, keep examining and re-examining and working around and checking these relationships. And then you look in the negative spaces. Oh my gosh, remember that, right? In here, there, what's going on there. And when you've done that, then maybe turn your stick on the side and put in some information about shadow and plane. Just a little bit. Work on gesture as well as what I'm showing right now, which is choppy, clunky, boxy, whatever adjective you want to use, more geometric structural work, are the two things that I've seen to provide the best yield in terms of success in work from the figure. Lots of gesture practice, And then working drawings out with structural line work, everything going together. And then light and shadow pattern, light and shadow shapes. We did some contouring of light and shadow shapes last time. We were looking at faces, and that can be done here. What are these shadow shapes? I tell you what will not give you a good yield, in my informed opinion, is thinking a lot about parts of bodies. We get live models so we can see them. But if I allow my expectations of what does that look like? What I see there, which is what I have to do, really has zero to do with my expectations about hands and what hands are going to do. I can tell you that. Doing a body part, and only that body part, to resolution and then going to other body parts, that can be really tough. Whereas if everything is worked together, put in together, indicated together, and the relationships can be figured out, that has worked pretty well. But if we stay on the surface, and I've been working with plane, light and shadow, sort of rough cut, that carving analogy kind of stuff I like to do. Here's a way of, here's me slipping into stuff that will destroy me. Are we ready? That's me slipping into destruction. Thinking about something that I know that's there, and then putting in on the surface my idea of it. Everybody see that? Like why that began to look cartoony, or like a mark on the surface, or we say, well, I know that there is a nipple there or whatever, but what I really see there, which by the way is small and not that big, is better described with a few pieces of information about shape, light, and shadow, and then it may become part of my form here. But if I just, you know what I mean? I've seen this chest, doing this kind of stuff for some guy's chest hair or whatever. It will stay on the surface. Don't do that. Okay? That, bad idea. Surface stuff, and it'll float on the surface too. Whereas if I do something that is about the shadow and light pattern, it will look so. Let's do another. And let's approach it very similarly, practically the same, but we'll throw in a little bit of gesture and cross contour. Okay. Can you see the negative shape in there? And here, here. Those will be our friend. Can you see some shadow shape info right away? You squint if you need to, right? I might begin this drawing lightly, loosely, more gesturally than the one I just did. So my marks may be curvier, or more gestural, and not look as blocky as the structural line approach. But I will prioritize the same kinds of information, okay? Meaning, once I get something established, and I feel that I haven't got, horrible trouble, and if I do have horrible trouble, I'll be moving something or changing something around and trying to address it. But from here, I'm going to try to find light and shadow info. So rather than thinking legs, drawing legs, look for the information that is reflected by shadow shapes, and without tightening too much up, everybody can see how this shoulder is in tone, right? Over here, how it's in shadow. Put some of that information in. And think a little bit about that cross contour stuff. For example, this turns like this, right? Remember that cross contour stuff, like feeling the form, like how things turn in space? All right. Coming back over here. Who could share with me some figure drawing? I wish very much to see some figure drawings. Who can show me a figure drawing you've made?
Sorry, it's uncompleted.
Press it up to the screen a little bit more there. A little more. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Okay, I think I can, yeah. Who else? Who else? Break out those Conte crayons. Break out the, oh yeah. Good, Henry. CC, hold it a little more still because those backgrounds make what's the term for when the backgrounds do that? Is there a particular term for that? Well, anyway, good, good. Anybody else got some figure drawings to make me feel less? Oh, there's one. Good, thank you. Oh, here they come. I can feel my blood pressure drop and my spirit rise. Good. Okay, great. Yeah. Do you like the feel of the Conte crayon on the newsprint? It's kind of a good tactile sense, right? Yeah. Okay, great. Very good. Nice. Go back to the screen share and we'll get a little bit more. We'll get some more tips and we'll get some more examples. But as of now, if next time I can say, all right, we're going to do some gesture warm-ups. These poses will be, this long, and we'll have 10 of them, and we can jump in there and do that. And then, I could say like, okay, the pose is going to be a little longer. We're going to put a little more info in there. How about you start gesture, try to stay gestural, or then maybe we'll do some, all right, structural lines. Let's start with the structural lines, so that basically in calling out some terms like that, we know, what we're up to. Let's try with one of these images. Oh, let's see, let me pick one. I'm gonna pick this one actually for this. Let's try to create, by the way, something very similar with the animals. When I would get animals sent over, and I would see these very clear. I could tell people were listening. I would have like a very clear sort of like contoured platypus, say, and then I would have a mottled in light and shade platypus, or I'd have a Boston Terrier. Like I'd have the same animal drawn with like both of these that was nice because I could tell that you heard that and you were getting that. Why don't we do that with say one of these? I will make a kind of gesture based study, and then I'll make one that's more, I'll do two approaches. Okay, so if I'm, boy, am I tight, I need to loosen up. I need to loosen up indeed. But if the model did this great sort of crunch, hugging the self kind of pose here, and I got myself started with something like this, and then I looked into some things around, some negative spaces, and kind of going over and over and over the bend repeatedly. I might develop drawing like this, starting gesturally, curvy, and something. Gesture is so good for not missing, like getting that sense of weight and volume and muscularity and these kinds of things. It's like gesture is really good for that. As well as just, it's just an all around great sort of drawing thing. Everybody knows that in art classes, the teacher is always saying, loosen up, you know, because that's what they do in art class. They say, loosen up, but there's reasons for that. Most of the time, when I commit error, I can attribute it to my getting picky too soon, being tight, going to the specific before I've got a good sense of the general, and so forth. So loosening up is just, you know, it's good to do, right? So we'll try now, you know, like we'll make a drawing that's primarily, you know, gestural in its approach of one of these images of pose. And then, you know, sort of do the same thing, but start in a different way. So we'll, in that way, we can kind of compare and contrast the techniques or the approaches. So this would be that I'm looking at the same thing, but I'm going to do the rough cuts. I'm going to do a structural line. Most of us kind of take to this faster. It doesn't mean it's better. It might mean this is harder. It might mean this is like closer to, you know, to kind of, to make a rigid, stiff line, like kind of like, I get it. I can see how like laying out a figure this way is sort of closer to, you know, the gesture is, you know, something you kind of have to adopt as a philosophy and stick with for a while to, uh, that makes sense to me. And here I can sort of do things, I can kind of draw, like where does this elbow, if I make a line, like where does this, you know, like what's the relationship between this part and this part, and draw all the way through, kind of map out these relationships. It's a lot like geometry, right? Seems like geometry. I don't know that there's something, you know, in the rest of life, like gesture seems like it's exclusive to, you know, it's more sort of like you come across it in drawing, whereas you might agree that something like the structural lines is easier to align in your mind with, you know, something having to do with building. I said geometry a minute ago. Something else, whereas gesture is, it's like drawing class stuff, and you know, there's no spillover of gesture in like blueprints for building houses or something. There's no spillover of gesture to constellations in the sky. There's no like, but yeah, we can use. I've had great success with this kind of stuff. The students working it out, allowing it all to be chunky and rough until the problem is that while you can get to a drawing that is generally correct, perhaps faster working this way, or you can observe students using these methods and getting, the thing of it is that sort of sense of action and liveliness and all of that may not be there as much as with gesture, like without the sort of like if you really want stuff to look like it's alive and dynamic and all of that. I don't know that there's any other. You want proportions right? There's a couple of different ways to do it. You know, you want to get drawings of figures that don't have huge mistakes and great awkwardness. Okay, you know, you can use a number of methods, but to get that kind of sense of action and fluidity and kinetic, gesture is the way to do that, and maybe the sole way, to really get the kind of awesome, the qualities that we crave in drawings of people. I got a lobby for gesture. I'm a big believer, as if you can't tell, that gesture is a long-term prospect, but absolutely worth the investment. Okay. So yeah, if you can create for me like two drawings from the same pose that kind of exhibit some different things that you know how to do, uh, because we've worked on them from stuff, and now we're looking at bodies, but you know, say, well, I'll have more of a gestural drawing. I'll have more of a kind of, oh, you know what I want to do, Mullins? I want to mask one in with charcoal. We did some stuff with charcoal. We masked them. Well, that's valid. Why not give that a go? So something like this. You know. We might have a really brief pose. Might see something like that happen, right? Might have a little bit more time on the pose and might turn this stick on its side and really try to see what we can get out of it. And then we might conclude that it sure was nice to be in a younger and stronger body once upon a time. All right. Okay. So might make something like that, and then might break out the ballpoint pen and same pose, same reference. Change in approach. What is the most, anybody, what is the most drawings you think you've ever made at a single session, like at one time? What would you estimate as the most? This would probably mean your sketchbook so far. What would you say would be the most drawings you made at once? Anybody? 2 or 3? Because these figure sessions will be like, you'll be just cranking out, you'll have your newsprint pad, and then maybe you'll have your other pad, because if we get some longer poses, I'll often do that. Like we'll do a lot of quick stuff, and then a longer pose, maybe we'll break out the better drawing paper for a pose that'll last longer. But plan on these days in which we have models going through a lot of paper, a lot of newsprint.
啊，
Okay. Yes.
这还是诺罗吗？
不是了，
他画完了，
换成哪去了？
那鸡鸡吗？
有想看不？
Just an unmuted.
机器人。
Okay.
来看看。
Coming back over. All right. So, gesture. Who gets the concept? Everybody? Thumbs ups, right? And some good thumbs. Gesture is understood. Okay, good. Who is prepared next time I see you to, do a lot of this number, quick drawing and then just turn on the page and then quick drawing, turn the page. Good, good, okay. It's quite early still, but here in this post midterm kind of spot, spend a little time just with these things that I sent over. Just do a couple of little, practice things, do some gesture drawings, do some, whatever you like. If we have addressed it or covered it in class, you can use it to try to draw a figure, right? Anything that I don't have in your folder, if you still need to send me animals, if you still need to send me some people's faces, if you have, something from way back when that you didn't get done at the time, now's a good chance to catch up. And then some preparatory work. I'm not going to collect anything per se today. I just want to mostly get the group prepared and ready, just with some drawing from some pictures for life model sessions. So, some quickies, or maybe some slightly longer drawings from these images I sent over, is all you've got to worry about right now, as long as you don't have anything outstanding that's still due from before, okay? So do some of that stuff, and if you feel happy or proud about a figure drawing that you've done, you're welcome to send it over. You don't have to. If you have questions about anything having to do with gesture or anything like this, because I'm anticipating that if we have a share screen and it's mostly on a model, I won't be able to, you won't be able to watch me draw the model per se. You might be able to see me do some of, let's see what we get here. You might see me be able to do some of this kind of stuff, where I'm like pointing something out, over top of a model, right? Like that. You know, you might something like that, but you're not going to be able to see this drawing board and the model, and you're going to want the model in full view, filling up the screen entirely, right? So there may be some times in which, you know, you're just here, you're seeing a model, and I'm calling out poses, and I'm saying what to remember and what to do, but I'm not providing, you know, I'm not making visual examples at the same time, which is okay, but I want to have you ready for that. All right. So some preparatory drawing, gesture practice, you know, that kind of stuff from these still images of figure models that I've sent you. And then appear on time with your newsprint, with your charcoal, with everything handy, and maybe drink excessive coffee or whatever it takes to, you know, jump up and down for a while before we get started. I don't know, but with a lot of energy and enthusiasm for Wednesday. Okay? Sound good? Hit me with the thumbs up